Good afternoon, everyone. We are now going to start hearing evidence from a new witness, Mr. Brian Moore. And I'm going to begin by checking that he can see me and hear me clearly so that we can establish communication. Good afternoon, Mr. Moore.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I can hear you loud and clear.
Very good. Thank you very much. Now, I understand that you're going to take the oath. Is that right? Rather than make an affirmation. Yeah. So my first question is, do you have the testament there?
Yes, I do.
And on your screen, you should have the words of the oath. Have you got those?
Yes, I have.
Thank you. And then I must ask you then, take the testament in your right hand and repeat the words on the screen, please.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed. We have one or two small housekeeping matters we have to deal with before we actually put some questions to you. First of all, can you confirm that you're alone in the room from which you're giving evidence?
Yes, I confirm that.
Thank you. Can you confirm that you have no documents or other materials with you?
Yes, I confirm that.
Thank you. And finally, can you confirm that your mobile phone is in another room and that you don't have any other electronic device with you capable of receiving messages?
Yes, I confirm that.
Very good. Thank you very much. Well, I hope we shan't have problems with sound or vision, but if we do, we'll probably take a short break to let the technical support team sort them out. We'll have a short break during the afternoon, about 3:15 or whenever it's convenient. But if you need an additional break at any stage, will you just please say so and we'll do our best to accommodate you. Before we start, is there anything you'd like to ask me or anything you need to draw to my attention?
No, thank you.
Very good. Therefore, I'm going to ask Mr. Millett if he'd like to put some questions to you. When you're ready, Mr. Millett.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Moore. Can I start by asking you whether you can hear me and see me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you and see you clearly.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for attending this public inquiry to give your evidence. We are extremely grateful to you. If you have any difficulties in understanding any of the questions I'm going to put to you, or you'd like me to put the question again or in another way, please don't hesitate to let me know. Can I also please ask you to keep your voice up so that the transcriber, who's also on this call, can get down your evidence very clearly? Can I also advise you not please to nod or shake your head silently, but to say yes or no as the case may be, because that can go onto the transcript. If you need a break at any time other than the times that the chairman has indicated we're likely to take a break, then again, please let us know and we can take a short break. Now, you've made two witness statements to the inquiry. I'd like to show you the first of those, please. And that is at BBA 50159. Looking at the screen in front of you, is that the first page of your first statement dated the 12th of November 12th of November 2018?
Yes.
Can you please turn to page 14? There, above the date of the 12th of November 2018, below the statement of truth is a signature. Is that yours?
Yes.
Have you read that statement recently?
Yes.
Can you confirm that the contents of that first statement are true?
Yes.
Now, you've provided a second statement to the inquiry, and we find that at BBA 30011097. Can we look at that, please? And you can see that the date of that is the 18th of November 2020. Can you confirm that that is the first page of your second statement?
Yes.
Can you go to page 4, please? You'll see on that page, just above the date, a signature under the statement of truth. Is that your signature?
Yes.
Can you confirm that you've read this statement recently?
Yes.
You confirm that its statements are true?
Yes.
Have you discussed the evidence that you're going to give today with anybody before coming onto this call?
No.
I'm going to start the substantive questions by asking you about your background and role. And can I begin with paragraph 1, page 1 of your first statement, please? BBA 50159, page 1. And you say there that you're an executive director of the British Board of Agrément, BBA, a non-profit distributing company which operates in the construction products assessment, certification, testing, and auditing sector. I've been with the company since October 2014 as the operations director until June 2018, when I was appointed as the deputy chief executive officer, in addition to my duties as operations director. Is it right to say that you left the BBA in January 2020?
Yes.
Why did you leave?
To take up another appointment elsewhere.
And where do you work now?
I'm a director in a security company.
And was that the place for which you left the BBA?
Yes.
If we go to paragraph 2, you say, I am neither an engineer nor a scientist, and my role is to provide senior management oversight within the company. Where necessary, I seek and act upon specialist technical advice from expert colleagues and, exceptionally, from suitable outside sources. Could you just give us a précis, if you would please, of your educational background?
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Social Sciences. I have a Master of Arts degree in Human Rights. I have a postgraduate diploma in criminology, and I have a master's degree in business administration. And I'm currently a doctoral candidate in respect of certain aspects of law.
And what aspects of law are those?
To do with whistleblowers.
Right. Can you explain your career history that led to you going to work for the BBA in 2014?
Immediately before I joined the BBA, I was a student studying the master's degree and Master of Arts degree that I referred to earlier on. At the same time, I was conducting some consultancy work as a mentor trainer and also for a domestic violence charity in the private sector. For the 30 years preceding that, I was a police officer, an investigator, and senior manager in the service. And I was interested in experiencing the private sector. And I was approached by a headhunting organisation keen to find an operations director at the BBA. And after some discussions with them and the organisation, I decided to accept an appointment in October 2014.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I've had a message that Ms. Istefan has disappeared from the screen. I don't know whether that's general. It's true for me. It may be true for everybody else. That's a problem.
Yes, I just checking that she's not just moved around the display, but you're right. I think she has disappeared. Right. You see, Mr. Moore, I shouldn't have said that we wouldn't have any technical problems. It looks as though we may have one straight away. Well, I think what we better do is to have a short break and see if we can recover Miss Istefan, because she, I know, will want to hear your evidence, and she ought to be here so that she can see it as it's given. So I'm going to suggest we'll not back yet. No, we'll break for as short a time as we can. Since this is the first break in your evidence, I'm going to say this now, but I'll probably say it again. Please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything to do with it while you're off screen, so to speak. All right?
I understand.
And we'll come back as soon as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. I'm sorry about that break in the proceedings. We think we've now got Ms. Istefan connected well enough to continue, so we're going to go on with Mr. Moore's evidence. But if it transpires that Ms. Istefan can't receive well enough in order to understand the evidence, then we may have to break again. But for the moment, we're going to carry on. Mr. Moore, I see you there. You can hear me and see me, I hope.
Yes, I can.
Good, thank you. Well, I apologize for that break in service, so to speak. But we think we're back up and running, so we'll carry on, and I'll ask Mr. Millett to go on with the questions. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Moore, I wonder if you could go back, please, to your first witness statement at paragraph 2 on page 1 and have that displayed on the screen in front of you. You see there, and I read to you, that you said, where necessary, I seek and act upon specialist technical advice from expert colleagues and exceptionally from suitable outside sources. In general, at your time at the BBA, from whom did you seek expert advice internally?
Depending upon the field, it would be the technically qualified departmental head. There was also a consultant senior scientist with a roving commission inside the BBA. Those would be the principal sources of advice that I would consult with.
And who was the consultant senior scientist with the roving commission in 2014 when you started? Do you remember?
Forgive me, I've forgotten his surname. First name is Jonathan. I can't remember his surname, I'm afraid.
Right. And did it change? Did that the person occupying that role change between then and your departure from the BBA?
No, though in approximately 2018, a director with responsibility for technical affairs, a very senior engineer, was recruited and appointed into the BBA, who again was the principal source of engineering advice and direction to the business.
And what was their name?
That was a Mr. Paul Valentine.
Right. Yes. Now, looking back at your paragraph, you also say, and exceptionally from suitable outside sources. During your time at the BBA in general, again, from whom would you seek expert specialist advice from outside the BBA?
There was something called TAC, which was the Technical Advice Committee. This was a body of distinguished people from outside the organisation who, at the discretion of the chief executive officer, would be invited to form a body about whom particular issues could be discussed. I didn't have a huge amount of dealing with them myself, but occasionally it would be to refer significant projects. I can remember one that I did discuss with them.
I follow. And did TAC have any day-to-day contact on projects as they were ongoing with individuals more junior within the BBA, for example, project managers?
No, I don't believe that was the case.
Did TAC have any fire expertise on it at any time?
I can't specifically recall whether it did or it didn't.
Turning to your role and responsibilities, as operations director, to whom did you report?
I reported to the chief executive officer.
And at 2014, who was that?
That was Claire Curtis Thomas.
And did that reporting line change between your arrival in 2014 and your departure?
No.
And how many people under you did you manage?
It varied slightly, usually more than 100 people.
And did all 100 report to you directly in your role as operations director?
No, there were 4 departments, one which managed audit, one which managed inspections, two which managed assessments and certification, but that was effectively one department split into two. There was a test area which had its own operational responsibilities. Those were the principal departments which reported to me through a technically competent head of profession in each one.
And looking particularly at the two or perhaps combined single assessment and certification department from 2014, October 2014, who was it from that department who reported to you?
Mr. Brian Chamberlain was the first person in post, probably, forgive me on dates, probably throughout 2015. Then Mr. Simon Rowe throughout 2016 into 2017. And then in 2018 to 19, some restructuring took place, and a lady called Ramona took over as the manager of that team, Ramona Donnelly.
What responsibilities did you have as an operations director?
So broadly, it was twofold. The productivity of the staff, because obviously it's a commercial organisation, there were expectations about income that had to be achieved through productive activity. And secondly, quality. The BBA has a regulator and is assessed against a standard called 17065, I believe, which had so there's a quantitative element and a qualitative element. And then from approximately April 2015, I was appointed to the board of the BBA, and thereafter, of course, had the normal fiduciary duties of a director at a more strategic level to deliver the success of the business, etc., at that board level.
And what did your job as operations director involve on a day-to-day basis? Can you give us a précis of that?
So usually it would be sort of aligning resource to demand, the issues of problems or difficulties that staff wanted to consult me about operationally, particularly during 2015 and into 2016. I began to take an interest in intelligence about the industry and making sure that anything that related to poor practice in the industry that was coming to our attention was brought to my attention so that I could decide how best to deal with it. So summarising that, aligning resource to demand, achieving productivity, problem solving, trying to identify risks and just maintain an efficient and effective approach to delivering the business of the BBA.
Yes, thank you. Now, we've heard in the evidence of Prayer Nkomo that when a certificate was suspended or withdrawn, it would be passed to a team manager or head of approvals, or, he said, operations manager for sign-off, and then a director for final sign-off. Does that accord with your recollection?
Yes, that sounds quite reasonable. During 2014 and 15, maybe into 16, there was a company secretary whose role was to deal with signing off the final signature, if you will, on behalf of the CEO for suspended or withdrawn certificates.
Were you ever involved in the process of signing off a suspension or withdrawal as a certificate during your time as operations director?
Yes.
Which certificate specifically can you recall?
No, I can't recall which specific certificate.
Was there one or was there more than one?
I would say there was more than one.
Right. Were there many?
Not many. over a 4 to 5 year period, double figures, possibly not common, but not rare.
In the main, in your experience at the time, what would have been, or what were the reasons for the BBA suspending or withdrawing those certificates?
There was a significant deviation from the expectations of what a client should be doing. Some form of potential abuse, if there was if there was intelligence about malpractice, or that the certificate was no longer in conformity for some significant reason, and that could not be remediated promptly or properly. So it was normally a relatively serious thing. One can imagine the commercial effects upon some companies of having their certificate suspended and withdrawn. I think due process, you suspend first, and then subsequently, if matters aren't remediated, move on to withdrawal. I think I can't remember too many cases of a certificate being withdrawn, right from the very start.
Thank you. Now, you became, I think, Deputy Chief Executive Officer in 2018. Is that right?
That's correct.
And what did that role involve?
The BBA was, like many organisations, undertaking a change process, trying to restructure, modernise. It was opening an office in other parts of the country, and so the drawn time of the Chief Executive Officer, whilst we were doing all this, and the normal day-to-day activities of the business, meant that she needed a more substantive deputy, and that was my role. There was just extra things going on in the company that were bearing down on the senior management team, and it was decided to have a deputy to support the CEO when she was not available.
And did you report to her?
Yes.
And what additional responsibilities came with that role?
So largely about change management. My role was to give particular focus to the change of structure, the modernisation programme, taking all that stuff forward had quite a heavy and additional burden. And it also coincided, of course, post this terrible tragedy, that the BBA was very active in trying to improve things in the industry, which required the CEO to be elsewhere quite a lot of the time.
Did the change process begin after the Grenfell Tower fire?
No. The organisation was always trying to change, to improve. I think the formalisation of the process. So, well, you might be right thinking about it. The actual structure, the plan was probably put into place circa 2018, but it had been run up. The run up to it was before that, and approaching the governing board for sign off was probably 2018. But there's quite a lot of activity going on before then.
Were you ever involved in the actual certification of products certified by the BBA, or was your role a purely managerial one?
I didn't do any physical assessments of products or systems. No, I wasn't qualified to do that.
Were you ever asked to sign off any certificates or check any drafting?
Yes, I was asked to do that when, in the absence of the CEO, that on behalf of the company, to take responsibility for the fact we had completed our process to our satisfaction, and to add my name to the certificate in her absence.
And when you did that, did you yourself undertake any checks or spot checks of the underlying data to verify for yourself that what you were signing was true and accurate?
If I had any queries, I would want to see the staff members involved. I can't remember what used to particularly catch my eye or ear, if anything, but I could invite and seek any views that I thought appropriate based upon the certificate Usually how long, what if things had taken a long time, why had they taken a long time, etc. So I had discretion to ask. I did, but I did not go and bring big bundles of documents into my office and pour through them all. I wanted to satisfy myself that our process had been followed. But I never, to the best of my recollection, got hold of big bundles of core documents.
And were the people who brought you these certificates to sign in your capacity you've described, Brian Chamberlain, Simon Rowe and Ramona Donnelly, during the respective dates you've given us?
Yes, but not all would be signed by any one of the three. Mr. Chamberlain, when he was no longer the head of that department, he moved into a technical advisory role alongside the chief scientist gentleman that I mentioned earlier. So he too would have an expert role as an additional head of a department, because he had unique knowledge and skills. So sometimes he would sign certificates as being the competent technical manager. And it may not be Mr. Rowe or Miss Donnelly who would sign those.
Who normally would bring the unsigned final certificate to the chief executive, or in your case as deputy, the operations director, to sign?
There was another department that specialised in the preparation of these certificates, word grammar, wordsmithing, the layout, any photographs, and they're called the publications department. And they had a to and fro role between the technical team in terms of making sure that all aspects of the certificate had been covered off. And they had a checklist, which I think was called a traveller log, of things that were required and ticked off, and who had approved which. And what would be delivered to me would by this publications department would be the draft certificate and this checklist called the traveller log.
I see. And this publications department, would that get involved in the primary drafting of the certificate by the project manager responsible for it?
I don't think the primary drafting, because quite a lot of the document was in some ways templated. There was footers and headers, etc. But no, the project, the technical people were responsible for the technical content of the document, because the publication staff were not technically qualified to do that. They would just make sure the formatting, and then there was a fair bit of toing and froing to the client as well. The client doesn't like something, the photograph is the wrong one, or somebody's name's changed, etc. So there would be some toing and froing between the BBA and clients via this publications department, but they had no remit to make technical decisions or make technical alterations to the certificates.
Yes. I want to turn next to your knowledge and experience. Were you required to have any knowledge of construction materials in order to be able to perform your role either as operations director or as deputy CEO?
No.
Did you have any expertise or experience in respect of the certification of building products?
No.
Were you required to have any knowledge of UK building regulations?
I wasn't required to, but of course, as part of my role, every day I was coming in contact with this, and of course gained some knowledge, but I do not appear before the inquiry today claiming to have technical knowledge such that I would like to argue with a scientist or an engineer.
No. Did you become familiar with approved document B, forming part of the building regulations? Approved document B concerning external fire spread on buildings.
Could you just repeat the first part of your question? I'm sorry.
I'll put it slightly differently. Did you, during your time at the BBA, become familiar with approved document B, which concerns external fire spread on buildings?
Become familiar. I certainly looked at it and read it, but I would not claim that I had a deep understanding of all its applications and implications. But I did look at it, read it, and try to assimilate it where it was relevant to what I was being asked to consider, if anything.
Yes. Did you ever have any formal training on the contents of approved document B?
No.
Would it follow that you didn't have any training on the UK National Standard Testing regime, the BS 476 testing regime?
No, I did not have formal training.
Did you have any knowledge gained from experience about that regime?
As my previous answer, it was yes. I did read it. I did look at it. I tried to understand it, and of course, it would be being discussed regularly in my presence, particularly if there was some issue of the day regarding it. But I always would take the advice of those I believed had the expertise. I would challenge. My job was to. Is there a risk here? Is to challenge, is to ask those simple questions: why, how, etc., and elicit a logical response where possible.
Can you remember how soon after you joined the BBA in October 2014 you read the British Standard 476 testing regime?
It certainly wasn't within the first, certainly wasn't in 2014, having joined there in October. Certainly from, say, the Christmas period at the end of 14 onwards, I was, yes, of course, trying to assimilate myself into the role.
Right. Do you remember what it was that prompted you to go and look at BS 476?
I can't remember anything specific. I don't think there was a specific event or issue. It was just, it was just something I felt I should know more about. There was also other things. It wasn't just about fire. Another major area was, of course, things that could fall off buildings, wind loading and various things like this, which were also significant. Durability. So I just tried to read my way into it, but I can't remember, to your question, I can't remember a specific incident or event that took me to, I must urgently read this document.
I see. And does the same also apply in relation to the European fire testing and classification regime?
Yes, I think it would be a similar approach. There was the British, forgive me, not British, the England and Wales approach, and there was it wasn't the same, but it was acceptable under the Euro classifications. They were different tests, but they each could satisfy the requirements of the approved documents within the building regulations, as I recall. I was interested to try and understand that better.
Yes, you were interested to try and understand that better. When exactly, to the best of your recollection, did you become interested to try to understand that better?
I can't. Forgive me. I can't put a date on it. It was just part of my role.
Right.
There were many things about assessment, testing, audit, inspection that I wanted to know more about.
Right. Did you do research on the side in your own time into the UK national testing, England and Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and the European testing for fire?
I can't. I was working at least 6 days a week, long days, and I can't say whether it was in my own time or work time. I was trying to assimilate this, but at some period during the working week, I was just trying to become more knowledgeable.
Thank you. Now, did you become aware, looking at the European regime, of the meaning of the classifications A through to F? A being at the top end of the range and F being at the bottom.
Yes, again, forgive me, quite a long time ago, but yes, clearly there was a differentiation between them.
Now, I'd like to ask you one or two questions about training more specifically. Can we please go to BBA 30-10762? This is a bundle of presentations which we understand were given at the BBA, and you can see that they bear the BBA logo. On page 1, you can see a presentation entitled Fire, and if we look at page 5, we go down to page 5, please, we can see what appears to be a handout that goes with this presentation. At the top, you can see the date, 2011. Now, it's very small on your screen, Mr. Moore. I'd like it to be expanded so that you can see it more clearly. Can you see at the top?
Yes.
It says Fire Presentation 2011, updated December 2012, yes?
Yes. Yes.
Just pausing here, is this a document you're familiar with?
I've got no specific recollection of it.
Very well. Let's see how we go. If we go to page 7, we can see another presentation. And you can see in the top left-hand corner a red and blue logo triangle. In the red part, it says Fire Safety Part B and Fire Presentation. And in the blue part, it says John Denyer, Principal Scientist, Nisha Sharma, Project Manager and Tech Coordinator, Fire, 26th of April, 2016. Is that a document, or the beginnings of a document, that ring a bell with you?
Well, firstly, can I just alluding to a previous answer? Mr. Denyer is that senior scientist I was referring to. Forgive me, I had a moment where I forgot his surname. That's a helpful prompt. And I was aware that Nisha Sharma had this liaison role between the BBA and one of the test fire test establishments. I think might have been Exova. So this seems more familiar, but I can't be sure that I have seen this document before.
Thank you.
It's possible, but I can't recall it.
Let's go to page 15, and we can see there. And we may have to have that blown up as well, but page 15, you can see at the top it says Fire Safety Part B and Fire Presentation 2016. And it's said to be part of a fundamentals training program, which commenced in February 2016. All PAC staff with less than 3 years experience at the BBA are required to attend, in addition to staff working in the area under consideration. And then it says, this presentation has been extended to include fire, which was provided to all PAC staff as part of the training sessions held during 2011. Now, Mr. Moore, I don't think you were, well, you weren't at the BBA in 2011. But do you know who would have had to have attended the presentations in 2011 and 2012?
I don't know.
Now, you were operations director when the 2016 training was introduced, weren't you?
Yes. Yes.
Do you know what prompted the BBA to institute this training program?
No, I don't know, or I can't remember. I'm not sure which.
Do you know what is meant in this document by PAC staff?
Yes, that's the assessment and certification staff, product assessment and certification. These are the staff, the project managers, principally, that refers to.
Yes, I see. Do you remember whether you attended this presentation yourself?
I don't have a specific recollection, but that front sheet, certainly Ms. Sharma's role, does look really quite familiar to me, but I can't be sure.
Now, you say Ms. Sharma's role, you mentioned earlier on that she was connected, and maybe I've misunderstood this, but she was connected in some way with Exova.
Yes. From recollection, the BBA paid a small or modest retainer to Exova, and so if there were inquiries or generic requirements outside of project management specifically, through Ms. Sharma was the liaison point around that. So the expectation, as I recall it, was if a project manager had an issue generically about fire, or the chief scientist, Ms. Sharma was the conduit to approach the firehouse for this generic advice. It was an ongoing, I think, been going for a number of years, that a small retainer was paid for advice.
If you could go back, please, to page 12. There's just something on that page I just want to pick up with you. At the foot of page 12, you can see that there is, forgive me a moment, a set of details of fire test organizations. And there you have Exova Warrington with this is the bottom, you've got it there, Andy Kearns, and BRE Global, Stephen Howard. And then underneath that, it says, the BBA has a consultancy agreement with Warrington, whereby under a monthly fee arrangement, advice is available free of individual charge. As a result, Warrington should always be consulted before BRE, although BRE can carry out certain tests that Warrington do not offer. There is a BBA/Exova Warrington query form, which is available on the intranet under Technical Forum tab in the reference library. This document should be completed as fully as possible and sent to Nisha Sharma for forwarding to Exova for their opinion. Now that's there. Does that accurately summarize the arrangements that the BBA had at this time, April 2016, with those two organizations?
That seems, what you've just read out and what I've just read, it seems consistent with my memory of that time, because I think I articulated something not as concise as that, but quite similar, I think.
Yes.
Yes.
Was that the arrangement, or those the standing arrangements that existed when you arrived at the BBA in October 2014? Do you remember?
I'm not sure. I can't be certain.
Right. And do you know what the arrangements were with the BRE? So if somebody wanted advice from the BRE, what arrangements would govern the giving and taking of that advice? Well,
you've noted earlier that when I relied upon my memory, I didn't have reference to BRE Global in my memory. I only have a recollection of Exova Warrington. So I am not sure about the BRE Global. Even having read it now, I'm not sure whether that was part of the arrangements when I joined the BBA or subsequently. So I'm not clear about that.
Right. Are you able to tell us anything about what arrangements might have existed as between the BBA and the BRE, whereby the BBA could take advice from the BRE, particularly Stephen Howard, who's identified here as the contact point?
No, I mean, they were on the same location as us, but I'm not aware of formal or financial, a contractual relationship between the BBA and BRE regarding fire. As I've stated, I did remember this it's better worded than I just explained, but a consultancy agreement. I've called it a small retainer. I remember that, but I'm not aware of a similar financial arrangement contractual with BRE Global.
Now, thank you. More broadly on the subject of training, during your time at the BBA, were there any training requirements or any regime in place for project managers?
when a project manager, so the numbers were relatively small of project managers in the teams, probably 20 or so, 20 plus staff in each team. So we didn't have large influxes of staff and large outgoings of people leaving. So the approach was when someone was inducted into the BBA, their qualifications, their background, their skill set and experience, as against the vacancy where it arose, try to recruit to that position. And then the process was to have hands-on, side-by-side training next to a more experienced peer and manager to assess their progress. Now that was the position from when I joined 2014. More in approximately 2017, a HR manager with a training background was recruited, and in 2018 or 19, an actual learning and development manager was inducted. Again, this was to more formalize the training of staff as they were onboarded. But for the bulk of my time at the BBA, it was hands-on support to an individual joining.
I see. So in a word, learning on the job.
Yes, largely. The first year, however, the first year or so was pretty much predominantly given over to learning. So over time, over year two, the balance of them understanding the background, the norms, the way the organisation worked, they gradually moved into a more operational capacity. So certainly the first 6 months and probably up to a year, the balance was more towards their induction, understanding of the environment and the products that they would be working in.
And what about team managers and technical heads or heads of approval? Did they have ongoing or continuing professional education or development?
The BBA offered everybody charterships. By that I mean affiliations to professional bodies for ongoing training, and there was a budget set aside each year to pay the fees for staff. You'll probably have noticed, if you've seen the email footers of BBA staff, normally there's a fellowship or a chartership. So the BBA was investing in their professional chartered development as they went along. In terms of management experience, when I arrived there, I was not convinced that the managers had formal management training. An external provider of management training was identified, I think, in 2015 into 2016 to provide a more structured approach to learning requirements for managers. Right.
Going back to an answer you gave us before about project managers, people coming into the organization in a junior role. Yes. You said that over time, over year two, they gradually moved into a more operational capacity. But during year one, that was, you said, pretty much predominantly given over to learning. Would you expect a project manager who had joined the organization in, say, September 2014 and the cladding department in November 2014 to be given the job of reviewing an existing certificate as one of the first jobs in that role?
Again, it depends. It depends on the individual and their background. It depends upon the relative complexity of the case. It depends how much side-by-side support they had from someone. But generally, it was expected to be a relatively induction-based, easy steps approach as their knowledge grows about the products in the organisation. So, of course, there are always exceptions, but that was the approach about getting people inducted and trained, which was the norm.
Would it be normal for somebody to be given the task of project manager reviewing an outstanding certificate for a product within the first month or two of arriving at the BBA?
Again, it would depend upon the individual and their experience and the complexity of the project and the support that they had around with them to do that. But generally, expected that they would do simple tasks that would be to train them. Generally,
Right.
If there are exceptions, then they would be exceptions.
Young science graduate in their second job, maybe 3 years out of university. In that situation, would you expect them to be given a project manager role or reviewing an outstanding certificate within the first few months of their arrival at the BBA?
Well, again, for the reason I said, that wouldn't be ideal. But again, it will depend. It will depend on a number of circumstances. But getting people to do things beyond their capacity or capability is not what any responsible organisation would prefer to do.
During your tenure at the BBA, was there any specific training given, either internally or externally, to project management staff or team managers on the building regulations, the approved documents, fire testing, or the writing of certificates?
Yes. As I mentioned, the principal scientist, the heads of department, the team managers would arrange training events, training days for their staff as they thought would be needed in that team. So yeah, there was a lot of time at the BBA given over to people doing training, considerable amount given over to this.
Was there a formal requirement for staff to maintain CPD, continuing professional development, on a periodic basis, such as annual?
Where they had applied for and had undertaken a chartership or a fellowship, which was the route that the BBA encouraged, then yes.
What was that requirement?
It would vary according to the fellowship or the chartership. It's my understanding, I may be wrong, that there are certain requirements that one has to fulfill to maintain a chartership or a fellowship.
I see. So the training that they got would depend on whether they were chartered or fellows of other organisations?
Not wholly, but that was certainly a part of the training environment that they're working in. And I say it would depend on their skills, their experience, the matters they had a particular interest in or penchant for, their manager's assessment of their capabilities, the head of department's view, and then trying to provide them the support, the training support that they needed.
Yes, but going back to my question, was there actually a formal requirement for staff to maintain CPD on an annual basis or any basis?
Well, outside my answer, no.
Right. Now, Valentina Amoroso gave evidence yesterday to the inquiry, and she told us that when she started her role as project manager in September 2014, there was no formal training in respect of fire engineering. It was, as she said, primarily learning on the job. The reference for that is day 106 at page 13, line 15. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I've got no reason to doubt that.
So it's right, is it, that project managers such as Valentina Amoroso were given no formal training in respect of fire performance at that time, late 2014?
I agree with that.
Did that change later?
The reason why I'm pausing slightly is that the BBAs did not, was not a fire test establishment. We did not claim as far as I am aware, that this was a field of expertise. The requirement was for the client or the issue to go to a professional fire test laboratory and bring back evidence. But I did expect that the BBA project managers and their managers would be able to interpret the evidence that they received from a fire test house.
And did you expect that BBA project managers and their managers would know what to look for when assessing the truth of a claim to fire performance that the client wanted to make in its certificate?
Yes, I would expect that that there should be a norm, and the role of the project managers to assess whether the evidence that's been offered and provided satisfies the requirements of the norm. So I would expect project managers and their managers and the scientist and the chief engineer between them to be able to come to a decision like that.
Right.
Given,
So
yeah, sorry.
No, sorry. Do finish your answer. I cut across you, I think.
Yeah, well, I think I pretty much finished my answer.
So to that extent, I think we can agree that you did expect that staff members in those roles would have fire expertise to that degree.
Fire expertise to that degree, to be able to read a fire certificate and understand what it was saying about the product that the project manager was assessing. Yes.
Yes, thank you. And does it follow from that a project manager drafting an original certificate, whether it's truly original or whether it's a confirmation certificate, or a project manager reviewing a certificate, would know how to go about assessing whether a claim for fire performance to be made in that certificate was justified?
Yes.
Yes. Now, can I then just ask you one or two questions about the BBA? Is it right to say the BBA operates as an independent, self-funding, non-profit distributing company?
Yes, that's correct.
I think it's limited by guarantee, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Did the BBA rely on its income from clients entering into contracts to obtain certificates?
Yes.
And also from payment of annual maintenance fees in respect of those certificates?
Yes.
So is it right to describe the relationship between the BBA on the one hand and its clients on the other as commercial?
Yes, that's correct.
In your time at the BBA, was there a code of conduct or other set of guidelines which contained principles of impartiality and how to deal with conflicts of interest?
Yes, the UCAS, the requirement from the UK Accreditation Service, and this standard, I think I mentioned 17065, required this. The duties upon the company directors as well, to avoid not only personal conflicts of interest, but also conflicts of interest for the company, were part of our roles and responsibilities, something that I took particularly seriously.
Yes. Looking at career progression for a moment, was there any criteria for pay increases for staff at the project manager or team leader level?
There's a combination of things. It became more formalised later on, 2018, 2019. But there was a combination of their experience, the breadth of work that they could take on. Were they very niche and narrow? That could be a good thing. Or could they handle a variety of different products? So there was no bonus scheme. There was nothing to incentivize in that way. It tended to be experience, time progression, and the amount of responsibility that the person adopted through their experience tended to be linked to an annual review of their salary and assessment by their managers.
Yes, I see. Were individual staff members, such as project managers or team leaders, set targets of any kind?
In terms of their productive time, yes, an amount of hours per year, which was expected to be productive, i.e. fee earning or undertaking other important issues. Yeah.
And how many hours per year would a project manager be expected to clock up?
Again, it would vary according to the individual, their experience, the kind of work that was in the team. If a new person, as I said before, maybe a small number of hours in their first year. The very top end people, 700 or 800 hours of productive time, fee earning time per year. In a range, so in other words, in a range from a small number up to hundreds of hours.
Yes, and it was your job, I think, as you told us earlier, to make sure that your staff were as productive as reasonably possible.
Yeah, the word, yes, the operable word being reasonable. Yes.
Yes. Now, you mentioned earlier an interest in whistleblowing. If a member of staff during your time at the BBA had become aware of a problem which they had come across during the course of their work, was there a procedure in place at the BBA to be able to report that problem without fearing any repercussions?
There was yes, a formal whistleblowing policy in the business through the HR department, but a range of other approaches as well to make sure that these kinds of things were escalated if it was causing concern to staff.
And given that you were operations director, would you have been involved in the reporting and investigation process arising out of such concerns?
Would very much depend what it was. If it was something about me, then no. But if it was more generic than that, then of course I would like to be. But a judgment would be made about how best to proceed. I remember my main concern was external whistleblowing, which I'd like to say more about if the inquiry would allow me at some point. But whistleblowing would be an internal dimension as well.
Do you remember whether any concerns were ever raised, either through the whistleblowing procedure or otherwise, about the certification of ACM, aluminium composite material panels, or insulation materials?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Yes, a member of the sales staff. This would have been after the fatal fire at Grenfell Tower, probably into 2018. A member of the sales staff raised concerns about his understanding of panels and the BBA's approach there too.
Yes, I see. Was that in relation to a UCAS visit?
Yes, putting two and two together, a UCAS visit arose fairly shortly after the colleague or the former colleague raised his concern. So I hope I'm not jumping to conclusions, say the two things were linked, but it was temporally close to a UCAS visit.
Yes, I see. Did that member of staff challenge or criticise the BBA's position relating to the Rayner Bond BBA certificate?
Yes.
And what was the nature of that challenge?
Again, I can't remember the specifics of it. It was dealt with by another director, the commercial director, and the head of approvals. Mr. Alban met with this member of staff to discuss his concerns. The outcome that was fed back to me was there was a difference of view about the BBA's approach, and the more experienced the scientist, Mr. Alban, had listened carefully and given a view. The non-technical salesperson had a different view, and I think the outcome was that the scientist's view was reasonable, and matters were left there. Though I think matters were escalated by the colleague elsewhere, possibly to the media.
Right. You say there was a difference of view. Very briefly, can you tell us what that difference of view was?
I can't recall the detail of it, and I'm not sure it was ever really, really closely cited on the detail.
Can you remember what Mr. Alban said to you?
I can't remember specifically. They had sat down for a length of time with a colleague director there. They had exchanged, the concerns, views, what the concerns were, and Mr. Alban, you said, I can't see merit in these concerns. He felt the colleague didn't understand the application of the norm to the situation. Words to that effect.
Can you give us, even in outline, the basic gist of the point?
I can't. I'm sorry.
What was the topic? Was it fire? Was it water ingress? What was it?
If it was related to ACM, it must have been in relation to fire. I'm deducing. It certainly wasn't durability. It must have been something about fire, but I'm not certain.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we've had a bit of an interruption, but it's a convenient moment for a break, because I'm about to go on to a reasonably lengthy single topic.
Yes, well, it would be sensible to have a break at this point then, wouldn't it? Mr. Moore, I did warn you we're going to have a short break, middle of the afternoon. We will come back and resume at 25 to 4, please. In the meantime, I have to ask you not to talk to anyone about your evidence or anything relating to it. All right?
Understood, Mr. Chairman, yes.
See you in a moment then. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone. We are now ready to continue with Mr. Moore's evidence. Mr. Moore, can I just check that you can see me and hear me clearly?
Yes, I can.
Good. Thank you very much. Well, then, I take it you're ready to continue. So I'll ask Mr. Millett to carry on with the questions. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Moore, I would like now to turn to a different topic, namely Cooltherm K15 insulation manufactured by Kingspan. And I'm going to ask you some questions about issue 1 of the BBA certificate, number 08/4582, dated the 27th of October 2008. Can we please have that up on the screen? It's at BBA 6038. Now, you can see from what's on the screen in front of you that this is that certificate, and the date is at the bottom of the screen, together with the signatures of those who approved it at the time. Just so that you and I are clear at the outset, of course, you only joined the BBA in October 2014, and so you can have had no involvement in any aspect of the assessment or certification of this product in 2008, or the review of this certificate in the years that followed. That must be right, mustn't it?
That's correct.
Yes. When did you first see this certificate?
I can't remember. Certainly at the time when the inquiry was requesting information from the BBA, which would be after the inquiry was established, so 2018, possibly into 2019.
The reason I'm asking you questions about it, or I'm going to, is that you've offered evidence about it to the inquiry in your second witness statement of the 18th of November 2020, which we're going to come to. So that's why I'm asking you about it. Now, just looking at the document on the screen, you can see that it's a certificate for Kingspan K15. And if we scroll to the top of the page, you'll see the product. It's Cooltherm K15 rain screen insulation board. And under the heading, you can see that there's a blue shaded box that gives the product scope. Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
It says this certificate relates to Cooltherm K15 rain screen insulation board, a rigid phenolic board with foil composite facings for use as external thermal insulation on new and existing steel frame or masonry walls. The board is used in domestic and non-domestic buildings in conjunction with masonry or weather-tight ventilated cladding systems. Does that description accord with your understanding of this product?
Can I make it clear that my knowledge of this product is only that which I've put into my witness statement. My witness statement in November 2020 was to act. My role was to act as the locator, collator, and provider to the inquiry of material it wanted in its requests that they wished to see. So, to the best of my knowledge, I haven't expressed a technical opinion about the product at all, and I'm not convinced I'm qualified to do so. So, if I can be clear that I understood my role was to make material available to the inquiry rather than to try to give a technical opinion about it.
I understand that, and I'm grateful for that clarification. And we are going to look at your statement on this subject. But I should just say that the reason I'm asking you, Mr. Moore, rather than anybody else, is that nobody of whom we've asked detailed questions about the certificate at the BBA has been able to give any answers at all, apart from you. And that the answers that you've given are those that appear in your second witness statement. So you can understand, I hope, why I'm asking you questions about it. But given the qualification you've made, of course, we understand that. Bear with me and see if you can answer my questions. And if you can't, you can't. But let's see how we go, shall we? I've shown you the scope. If we look a little bit lower down page 1, you can see key factors assessed, yes?
Yes.
And under that, you can see, as under the third bold heading, behavior in relation to fire, yes?
Yes.
Then it says this, the boards will not contribute to the development stages of a fire or present a smoke or toxic hazard, see section 7. Have you, as you sit there today, any understanding about what that phrase means when it says the boards will not contribute to the development stages of a fire?
Well, without reference to section 7, taking the words as they are written, the meaning appears to be clear. The boards will not contribute to the development stages of fire. So that's what it appears to say. That's what I understand it to mean.
All right, well, we'll explore that in a little bit more detail in a moment. Do you know historically who had proposed that specific wording for this certificate as a result of your researches?
No, I think the request from the inquiry was to identify, I think, everybody who'd been involved in the process. I may be incorrect about that, but that's what I understood, and therefore, to offer from the HR department a list of the names that we think had been involved in this process. So if that process is right, it would seem it's one of the people in that list, but I can't tell the inquiry who it was who would have put that wording in there.
Right. And does it follow that you don't know whether, and if so, how, that language is taken from any guidance or the building regulations or any particular test standard?
No, I don't. It's not wording that I've seen before used in the context of other certificates that I have seen, for example.
Right. Do you know what was the scientific or evidential basis for the statement that the boards will not contribute to the development stages of a fire?
No, I don't.
Do you know how contribution to the development stages of a fire would be measured?
No.
Do you understand K15 to be a combustible phenolic insulation material?
Only to the extent that I know from what I've heard, of course, that it was one of the materials that burned at the tower, and therefore it must have had some degree of combustibility. But I don't know any more detail than that, to be candid with you.
Given that, as you say, it burns, how do you know, can you help us how it could be at all accurate to say that the boards will not contribute to the development stages of a fire?
I can't help the inquiry with that.
Can we look at Chris Hunt's statement, please? You can see his name at the bottom of the page there as the person who, as head of approvals, signed off this certificate. His statement is at BBA 30011087. And I'd like to show you paragraph 60 on page 13. BBA 30011087. And there it is, page 13, paragraph 60. If we go up, please, to the bottom of page 12, we can see that there's a set of questions which start at question 26 at the foot of page 12. And Mr. Hunt is asked this: in relation to the following statement, the boards will not contribute to the development stages of a fire, found at page 1 of the certificate. And then if we turn the page to page 13, please. Who provided this wording? Answer, para 58, I don't know. B, who checked and or authorized the inclusion of this wording? Answer, paragraph 59. I have a sight of the certificate traveller log CH5 and the individual's names are present. C, what is the statement intended to mean? Paragraph 60. I don't know, but I would refer to my answer to question 26E below. Now, just pausing on the I don't know, does that concern you at all?
Yes, it does. It does. Obviously, a lot of time has passed, and I don't know what Mr. Hunt may have seen or not seen, but that is an answer that is surprising.
Yes. Now, looking at paragraph E, which is underneath 61, the question that's asked of him is, what is the evidential basis for the statement? Please give full details of all and any material relied on to make this assertion and provide references where necessary to any relevant test or standard. His answer is, I don't remember, but I recall the page 1 content was intended as a summary from the sections within the body of the certificate. The summary directs the reader to section 7 where full details are given. That doesn't help, does it, in enlightening us as to what that expression means?
I would agree. It taken literally, unless there's some other explanation, what the reader could only interpret what is written there.
Do you know, and can you help us with whether this expression does not contribute or will not contribute to the development stages of a fire, had come from an early letter from the Loss Prevention Council to the BBA in 1994? Does that ring a bell with you?
No.
Well, let's see how we go. Can we go, please, to BBA 3011287? This is a letter dated the 13th of July, 1994, from the Loss Prevention Council in London to the British Board of Agrément, and it's addressed to Hugh Jenkins. You can see that the subject matter of the letter is Cooltherm K8 cavity boards. See that?
Yes.
Now, this letter, Mr. Moore, was exhibited to your witness statement to the inquiry, dated the 18th of November 2020, your second statement. And according to you, this was one of the documents on which the assessment of K15 by the BBA in 2008 was based. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, it was all the material, or included in all the material that the BBA was able to locate, around which it would only be around this material that that a decision would have been made. So to that extent, yes.
Well, let's see what you say. Can we have your second statement up, please, at page 4? I just want to look with you at paragraph 16 and 17. At paragraph 3M, you are asked the question, any additional documents relating to technical assessment or testing of K15 provided to the BBA by Kingspan at any audit, inspection or meeting? And at paragraph 16, you say, instead, the classification for K15 was extrapolated from a series of fire reports on similar Kingspan phenolic products, including those of similar density and facing type. Copies of the fire reports are exhibited at BM4. That's what you say in your statement. And as part of BM4, you exhibited the letter that we've just been looking at from the Loss Prevention Council. Can we go back to that? BBA 3011287. And if we go to item 1 on the first page, objective, to evaluate the test data relating to the above system. You see that?
Yes.
And the above system was K8 cavity boards, yes?
Yes.
And if we go down to page 2 of this letter, if we can scroll down there, you can see that in the top half of that page, there is a reference to the tests that the LPC were evaluating. And in the second line, it says that the test method there was BS 476 part 6, a sample of Cooltherm K9, a CFC-free phenolic foam with a glass tissue faced top surface and a foil-faced base surface. And it explains the results there. And then underneath that, test method BS 476 part 7, 1987, a sample of Cooltherm K9 got a class 1. Now, although the assessment is said to be in relation to K8 cavity boards, it seems from this that the tests under BS 476 Part 6 and 7 were carried out on a different product, namely Cooltherm K9. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
When you were investigating this and exhibiting this letter to your witness statement to support the extrapolation to which you were referring, did you notice that fact?
I noticed K8 and K9, but I don't think I made the distinction that you've just made as you've just explained it.
Now, the section I want you to look at is at page 3 under heading 4. If we can go to that, please. The first paragraph there under the heading Examination of Draft Certificate says, based on the examination of the content of use specified in your draft certificate, we do not believe that the product will make a significant contribution to a developing fire. The chances of the material becoming accidentally ignited during use is remote, but if it does become exposed to an ignition source, such as a plumber's torch, fire is unlikely to be propagated, etc. And then it goes on to say, this takes into account the known flammability characteristics of phenolic foam, also that within the cavity of a conventional wall, there is unlikely to be a sufficient supply of oxygen to support combustion. Now, looking at the words I emphasized in the second and third lines, we do not believe that the product will make a significant contribution to a developing fire. Do you agree that that wording bears a strong similarity to the wording that we've just been looking at on page 1 of issue 1 of the BBA certificate for Cooltherm K15, dated the 27th of October 2008?
Yes, it does appear to be similar.
Can I ask you what it was that prompted you to exhibit this letter to your statement, your second statement?
So, as I said, my role was to, on behalf of the inquiry, was
on behalf of the BBA for the
inquiry. Sorry, forgive me. For the inquiry, was to locate, collate, assess, and provide responses to the inquiry.
Who gave you this letter?
Probably Mr. Alban. There were several people involved in doing this locate, collate exercise. If in respect of our IT systems, there'd be an IT lead. In respect of any HR matters, HR lead. In terms of looking inside files, Mr. Alban. So I would imagine this is Mr. Alban, but I can't be 100% sure. More likely than not, Mr. Alban.
Right. Was the process of thinking that you need to explain the source of that phrase, and you asked somebody to go away and find a document that might explain it? Mr. Alban found this document and brought it back to you, and you exhibited it. Now, is that a fair summary of what happened?
No, that's distinctly unfair, and it is inaccurate. So my job was to find any material that could help the inquiry, a task we took very seriously, and make it available to you. I have no knowledge of the wording of the certificate. I did not ask anybody to do anything untoward at all. On the contrary, it's essential that the BBA helps this inquiry get to the bottom of some very difficult things.
Mr. Moore, don't get me wrong. I'm not accusing the BBA of obstructing the work of the inquiry. And I'm sorry if my question came across to you that way. What I'm seeking to establish is what the detective work was, which led to you exhibiting this document. Did you instruct Mr. Alban or anybody else to assist you get to the bottom of the origins of the phrase on page 1 of the BBA certificate?
No, not at all.
Right. Are you able to enlighten me as to how this document was found and why it was thought to be relevant?
Anything that could help the inquiry, spread the net as wide as possible to help the inquiry, was our approach. That's what I asked them to do. So it must have been in a file or somewhere close to or part of the Cooltherm files, K15 or any others, and we just gave the inquiry everything that we had.
Before you exhibited this document to your second statement, did you yourself look at it?
Yes, I remember the name at the top of it. The Loss Prevention Council is memorable. In terms of understanding its significance, I want also to provide an answer. So the explanation that it was that the extrapolation had come from similar products was a deduction, a rational deduction. It would appear as to why, because it was in the same file or close to the same material as would relate to Cooltherm K15's fire classification tests.
Did you ask yourself, when you looked at this document, why it was relevant?
It appeared to relate to the fire classification of the Cooltherm K series, and to that extent could be relevant.
Right, I see. Did you notice that this 1994 letter specifically relates to a cavity wall insulation product and not to an insulation board for use in an external ventilated rain screen cladding system?
No, I don't think I drew that distinction.
Going back, if we can then, to the certificate, BBA 6038 at page 1. Let's look again together at key factors assessed. Do you agree? And I'm sorry, I'll wait for it to come up. Yes, now there it is. Do you agree with me that if K15 is indeed, as I think you've accepted, a combustible material, do you agree that the statement, the boards will not contribute to the development stages of a fire, is inaccurate and misleading?
If Kingspan K15 will burn and will contribute to the development stages of a fire, then that is not correct.
Do you remember in your time whether the BBA ever received any queries, concerns, or complaints in relation to the use of that expression in this certificate?
I've no recollection of a complaint being made, as you've suggested.
Can we look at page 5 of this certificate next, please? This is section 7. Towards the bottom of the screen, behaviour in relation to fire. Can we look at 7.2 at the very bottom of the page? It says, the product is classified as class 0 or low risk as defined in the documents supporting the National Building Regulations. The product, therefore, may be used in accordance with the provisions of, and then if we turn the page, you can see England and Wales, approved document B, paragraph 8.4, volume 1, and paragraphs 12.5 and 12.6, volume 2, see also diagram 40. Did you yourself, when you signed your statement, see any underlying fire test data provided by Kingspan to support the claim in this certificate that K15 had achieved class 0?
I don't believe so. Anything I saw was in the material that I submitted to the inquiry. I don't believe there is anything in there like that.
No. Let's then look at your statement and take this a little bit more piecemeal. This is your second statement, 18th of November 2020, BBA 30101097. Can we go to page 4 in that and look at paragraph 3M? paragraph 3M is a request for any additional documents relating to technical assessment or testing of K15 provided to the BBA by Kingspan at any audit, inspection or meeting. And you say at paragraph 15, certificate 08/4582 and the first issue of certificate 14/5134 stated that the product was a class 0/low risk material. In order to demonstrate this, test reports are required to BS 476 part 6 and BS 476 part 7, and no such reports are contained on any of the K15 file folders. And then you say at paragraph 60, instead, the classification for K15 was extrapolated from a series of fire reports on similar Kingspan phenolic products, including those of similar density and facing type. Copies of the fire reports are exhibited at BM4. First, is this extrapolation exercise something that you had discussed with Mr. Alban at any stage?
Yes.
When, please?
At or about the time, and probably as a result of the request by letter from the inquiry in approximately April 2019.
What was the nature of those discussions?
Well, say, locate material, collate material, assess the material, and report the material.
What was the nature of? I'm so sorry.
Sorry. So that's the exercise. Well, if there are no Kingspan, if there are no fire reports to justify the class 0 statement, on what basis was the BBA included this in a certificate? Was the question that I asked. And Mr. Alban's view, a very experienced and senior person at the BBA, his view was that it was more likely than not that it was extrapolated from a series of fire reports on similar Kingspan phenolic products, including those of similar density, i.e. the material referenced at exhibit BM4. And you will recall that at the start of my statement, I did clarify that wording as deduction belief rather than an absolute. There is a formula here that someone has extrapolated from a series of fire reports.
Now, Mr. Moore, in your statement, you don't tell us that the classification for K15 was, as you were told by Mr. Alban, the product of an extrapolation. You assert that it was extrapolated. Why don't you tell us there that it was something that Mr. Alban told you?
No, it's something that I discussed with Mr. Alban, and I came to this view. Now, whether I was told in terms that it happened or that was my conclusion, but with so many of the requests from the inquiry, it was necessary for me to, collate and then assess why is this as it is. So it was one of numerous conversations I had when collating, locating and providing material to the inquiry from disparate sources within the BBA. So it was not unusual to try to contextualize information that was being given to the inquiry.
So I need to understand your evidence, because in your statement, you're making an unqualified statement of fact that the classification for K15 was extrapolated. Now I think you're telling us that, in fact, you were told by Mr. Alban that it was more likely than not that the classification was a result of an extrapolation. Which is it?
Well, let's just, with respect, let's be clear about the facts here. The request I received on or about the 17th of November was to transpose my letter of on or about the 19th of April into a witness statement, which at very short notice I did, probably overnight. If you look further up that witness statement, I provide an explanation as to belief. As to what, if you can look further up, I don't know what paragraph number it is, but it's further up that witness statement. Might I refresh my memory from seeing it?
Yes, of course. If you go to page 2, we can see paragraph 5, which might be what you want to refer us to. Is that right?
Yes. So this is the timeline. I was asked to provide a letter, provide information to the inquiry, came to the BBA, which we did. The narrative contained in it was a composite response drafted by me on behalf of the BBA following consultation and discussion with a number of individuals within the organisation. Paragraph 6, having left the BBA in January and been asked pretty much overnight to make a statement about something that I hadn't thought of in a long time, I wanted to establish whether any of the underlying facts had changed, i.e. had anything been found, because there's always a potential for human error in these things, for things to be misfiled. My short report, I said in paragraph 7, I believe that my short response is too brief. I think it would be more appropriate to say that instead, the BBA believes that the classification for Kingspan K15 was extrapolated from a series of fire reports rather than as a statement of fact. Now, whether I was told that as a statement of fact or whether I concluded it was a statement of fact is what I put in the letter. But when I came to make my statement in November 2020, I hope these paragraphs explain how I came to be in the position about what was written in my letter. And I have included in there that it was a composite response drafted following consultation and discussion, because I wasn't doing all the digging around and running around looking for all the material. I was having to respond to what I was being presented with. I hope that helps a little bit, just explain the context.
Well, let's see how we go. Are you able to tell us what the process or methodology that was used for the extrapolation was?
No, I can't tell you personally what it was. I understood that it was not, it wasn't common, but it was not unusual if there were products of a very similar kind to each other, and if the performance was adjudged to be so similar to one that we'd already assessed, it was not unusual for the BBA to extrapolate its opinion from one product to a similar one. That was the core of the conversation. Is
what you've just told us something that John Alban told you, or is it something you're telling us from your own knowledge and experience?
It is something that I'm saying arose in my conversation with Mr. Alban, based upon his knowledge and experience across many, many years, more than me at the BBA. To me, that sounded, and I think this material was actually in the place where the fire test reports would be in the particular folder. So it was far from it wasn't a leap of faith. It was a reasonable deduction to be drawn, and that was the basis for the belief.
Did the BBA follow any particular guidance when carrying out these extrapolations?
Guidance? Not that I'm aware of. It would be the opinion, the technical opinion of the competent individual, supported by their peers. A lot of the BBA work is a technical opinion, which we need to stand by and evidence. But I'm not aware that there's specific guidance in this case that was applied in terms of making the decision about extrapolation, if indeed that was the case.
Do you consider that this extrapolation to which you swear is a process permitted by BS 476 Part 6 and 7?
I'm not swearing that because I don't know it's a statement of fact. I am just trying to help the inquiry understand what happened or may have happened which was the purpose of providing information.
Well, with respect, Mr. Moore, you don't say what may have happened. You say, in an unqualified way, in paragraph 16, that the classification for K15 was extrapolated. I'll ask my question again. Do you consider that the extrapolation to which you refer in this paragraph is a process permitted by BS 476 parts 6 and 7?
I read it was to be, I'm not going to be argumentative, but just the first part of what you said there, can I refer you to my paragraph 5 and 6 to explain, and 7 of my statement to explain the position, please?
Yes, of course, we can go back to page 2. What is it in paragraph 5 to which you'd wish to draw our attention?
Well, just the process. I believe, forgive me if I'm wrong, at the start that you were referring to paragraph 16 of the statement. No, that's paragraph 16 of the letter that I sent in April. Here is my evidence clarifying paragraph 16 of the letter. But
Mr. Moore, I'm going to cut across you. All I want to know is your knowledge.
Yeah.
Do you think that the extrapolation process, which is the subject of your witness statement, is a process permitted by BS 476 part 6 and 7 or not? Or don't you know?
I don't know. However, no, I don't know. I can't be certain whether that is permitted. There's a certain logic to it, but whether it's permitted or not, I can't say.
Right. Looking at paragraph 16 again, please. You say that the extrapolation was from a series of fire reports on similar Kingspan phenolic products, including those of similar density and facing type. Do you know how similar, to use your word, the different products have to be for this extrapolation exercise to be permissible, if at all? Do you know?
No, I don't know I don't know how similar they need to be.
Do you know what factors would decide whether or not the different products were similar enough for this kind of extrapolation to be appropriate?
No.
To your knowledge, has this concept or methodology of extrapolating from test data from one product to another product to arrive at an assertion that that other product is class naught, to your knowledge, has that idea ever been discussed or checked by you with a fire engineer?
It has not been checked by me with a fire engineer.
The reports that you have exhibited, were those supplied to you by Mr. Alban?
Yes.
Did he tell you that it was those fire reports which formed the basis of an extrapolation, or, as you put it, more likely than not, an extrapolation?
Yes. Yes. I believe that material was in the folder. Could I just go back to paragraph 5 or 6, please?
Yes, of course. Page 2.
Yes, forgive me. At the bottom of paragraph 7, the principal reason for this belief, i.e. that there was extrapolation, is that the fire reports referred to be Exhibit B M4 had been copied into the K15 folder, and it is unlikely that would have happened unless someone had relied upon them.
Yes, I see. Did Mr. Alban play any part in your using or your exhibiting those reports? Or was it you who selected them from the K15 folder simply because they were there?
Anything and everything to do with K15 that I was aware of was submitted to the inquiry. So yes, so that was what we were being asked to do, as I understood it, and so that's what I asked my team to do: provide material related to K15. And if there was anything in that folder that related to K15, I hope it's been sent to the inquiry.
Now, I'm going to summarize the reports that form the exhibit, which you say were the basis of the extrapolation. I am going to summarize them and give the references. I'm not going to read them to you. The first one is August 1991, a report from a test to BS476 Part 7 on unfaced CFC-free phenolic foam laminate. That's at BBA 301130. A report from February 1993 under BS476 Part 7 on a K7 sarking board, glass tissue backed, 9 micron aluminium facing, BBA 30111286. The next one is October 1993, reports from tests to both Part 6 and 7 of BS476 on a product called K9, glass tissue, not foil, facer, and that's BBA 30111288 and 1129, BBA 1129. July 1994, an LPC letter, which we've seen. October 2003, a report from a test to BS476 Part 6 on Cooltherm DL2000 with an aluminium face and a glass tissue face, and a report also under Part 7 on Cooltherm DL3300 with 1 aluminium face and 1 glass tissue face. And those are at BBA 30s, 1131 and 1132. And then finally, a report in December 2003 to BS476 and 7 on Cooltherm DL3300, again, with 1 aluminium face and 1 glass tissue face. Do you know from your knowledge what consideration was given during the extrapolation process as to the age of those reports, one of which was 15 years old by 2008?
No, I don't know the process by which the extrapolation, if it occurred, did occur.
Do you know what consideration was given to the fact, as we can see, as I've said, that none of those products appear to have had the same facer arrangement as K15 in use in 2008, namely foil facers on both sides of the phenolic core?
Again, if they were in the folder in the section that related to fire, then it was the assumption, the belief that they had been considered. Now, whether they were satisfactory evidence to make the opinion that would support BS 476 in the absence of a test, I can't comment. If they're not sufficiently similar, then that can't be a good thing.
No, I understand. Do you know who it was at the BBA who'd been responsible for making this technical assessment for the first issue of the K15 certificate?
No. Again, I believe we provided a list of staff. I think that was one of the requests from the inquiry in the same letter, to provide a list of staff. You'll correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that was the case. So I would assume someone who'd been involved in that process on that list, but I can't be sure.
And you're not wrong that there was a list asked for and provided, but I think you can't tell us who it was on that list. Who was? No. Now, did you see during the course of your researches to prepare this statement any document demonstrating the extrapolation exercise? No,
I didn't see the document. I remember I assumed there must have been one. There must have been something for the extrapolation, which is why I wanted to check that, and there wasn't one. I went back to the BBA the day or two before I was required to make my statement. Had anything else been found? And the answer was no. So I didn't see, and I haven't to this date seen a document based upon which any extrapolation occurred, hence caveating it to belief and deduction rather than seeing a document that proved it had happened.
Yes. You agreed, I think, earlier, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, and it's apparent from your statement that there was no fire test data to BS 476 Part 6 and 7 provided to the BBA relating to Cooltherm K15 before the issue of issue 1 of the certificate in October 2008. Do you agree?
Well, I think my evidence would be that no such evidence was found in the files or any place that the BBA looked. It would be my assumption that the BBA wasn't provided with it, but as a matter of strict fact, I can't say, but it wasn't in the places where it should be. Instead was something else, the documents that you've just referred to.
Whose responsibility would it have been? And if you can't give me the name, then maybe you can give me the role or position to ensure that fire test data had been received for K15 before this certificate was issued.
The responsibility would be the project manager, who is responsible for assessing the product and coming to an assessment and a certification decision, plus those managing that person to quality assure that a suitable process had been followed.
Are you able to tell us why this extrapolation exercise was carried out rather than simply following up to Kingspan with a specific request for fire test data under BS 476 Part 6 and 7?
No, I can't. I'd be speculating as to why. It does seem to me it would be easier just to ask for the fire test.
Are you aware, as you sit there today, that during the whole of the life of this BBA certificate, Kingspan had in fact obtained test results which showed that K15 was not able to achieve Class 0 as a composite product?
All I've heard is a media report some time ago, which I inadvertently tumbled into, but today is the first formal and informed indication I've received that that is the case.
Do you agree that had the BBA actually asked to see any of the test data on which the assertion that the product had achieved Class 0 was based, the BBA would have discovered the fact that there was no such data?
Yes. Again, I don't know the facts, but surely if that information was in the possession of a client and provided to the BBA, it would and should have changed the outcome.
Do you agree that the BBA should have requested test data to BS 476 and 7 instead of extrapolating the data from different products and previous certificates, some as old as 15 years old?
Without knowing why this was done, the simple answer, the best route is to get the test data, the 476 test data, get it available.
It's the only route, surely, isn't it?
In the absence of any other explanation, I agree.
Yes. Do you accept that this is that proceeding to state Class 0 in the absence of any test data was a very basic failure of due diligence on the part of the BBA?
If there was no basis upon which to include that statement in the certificate, then that can't be correct. That can't be right.
Are you able to account for why it was that the BBA allowed technical statements to be printed in a certificate which would be relied upon by a wide range of construction professionals without doing even the most basic checks to make sure that the assertions were properly founded in evidential data?
I can't explain that.
Do you agree also, I think you do, looking at paragraph 10 of your statement, that in fact no initial inspection of the manufacture of K15 was carried out?
Yes.
I think the reason you give is that the product was very similar to others already covered by other BBA certification. Is that right?
Yes.
If we go to paragraph 11, it's probably better to see it on the screen. This is on page 3 of your second statement. You say there, as such, the level of quality control operated by the certificate holder was well established and considered to be satisfactory. The details for K15 were added into the existing BBA quality plan and then covered by the ongoing surveillance regime. What was the source of your knowledge that no initial inspection of the manufacture of K15 had been carried out?
Again, one of my 3 or 4 lieutenants, more likely than not, Mr. Alban.
Do you know who made the decision not to carry out such an inspection?
No, I don't.
Do you know what the reasoning was behind the decision to carry out no initial assessment inspection?
Sure. Other than the reason, the only reason I was advised of was the one contained in paragraph 11, i.e. that the certificate holder and the other products were well known, well established, and could be included within the existing quality plan.
Are you able to explain how anybody could have known that K15 was manufactured in an identical way to similar products if there'd been no inspection of the manufacture of K15 by the BBA?
Again, I can't. The underlying premise is that it's so similar to others that the BBA was already very familiar with.
Was it common practice, to your knowledge, in 2008? I know you weren't there at the time, but given your researches, was it common practice at that time at the BBA, when a new product was to be certified, such as K15, that no assessment was carried out at all on the basis that the level of quality control operated by the putative certificate holder was considered to be satisfactory?
It's difficult. A good number of years before I joined the BBA, it certainly wasn't acceptable at the time when I was there, and it's difficult to explain.
Right, and what does satisfactory mean there? Satisfactory by what measure? Can you help?
In terms of that, the ongoing quality management, the non-conformances, the adherence of the certificate holder to the quality plan was considered to be reasonable, i.e. satisfactory. They were cooperative, they were engaged, they were making the effort to adhere to the quality plan. That's my understanding of what that means.
And what is the source of your statements that you make here at paragraphs 10 and 11?
Again, in discussion with Mr. Alban, explain this to me, because we're going to write to the inquiry and tell them what we believe. And part of that discussion, he in turn will have spoken to other colleagues in the BBA to have a view, and he had his own historical knowledge. So that was the basis upon which I reported this to the inquiry.
Thank you very much. We're now going to turn to a completely different topic, but it is 2 minutes before 4:30, Mr. Chairman. It would be probably wise, with your leave, to break for the day and start that new topic tomorrow morning.
Yes. Can you give me any idea how long you might be with Mr. Moore tomorrow?
Yes, it would have been a little longer than I would have hoped this afternoon, I'm afraid. So it will be the morning.
Right. Well, Mr. Moore, we are going to break at this point for the afternoon. I'm sorry that we have to ask you to come back again for more questions tomorrow, but I think and hope you've been warned that that was likely to be necessary.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
So we'll resume at 10 o'clock tomorrow. And please remember not to talk to anyone about your evidence or anything to do with it overnight. And we'll hope, but I can't guarantee, to get you out by lunchtime. We'll see how we go anyway. All right?
Thank you.
See you at 10 o'clock tomorrow. Thank you. And that's where we break for the day. Thank you.